Sounds right.
Snappy, won't you? I have some very heavy thinking to do before 10 o'clock.
Sounds right.
Hi, everybody. I have with me Rosie and Sara.
Hi.
And they are from AIM ADHD. It's an ADHD-run ADHD-focused business that works with children and adults. AIM strives to help their clients educate, activate, or advocate and foster a healthy relationship with their ADHD in school, work, and at home. As ADHDers themselves, they understand how difficult it can be living with symptoms such as rejection sensitive dysphoria, ADHD paralysis, execute function disorder, and more. Focusing on helping their clients sort through the vast sea of ADHD information and find what applies to and works for them in tutoring, coaching, and helping them overcome their personal hurdles so they can be happy and healthy. And this is their aim. So, welcome both Sara and Rosie.
Yes, we're happy to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a really interesting conversation. So, there was quite a few things that you mentioned in there that I've never heard of before. But what I'd like to start with is like where your journey started with this.
I will start. I was diagnosed with ADHD later in life. So in my late 20s, I was diagnosed. They had treated anxiety and depression for about 10 years before another doctor tested me, and it was ADHD all along was the culprit. And it kind of changed my whole life from that point.
So did you find when they were treating the anxiety, it wasn't really helping?
No,
it wasn't really treating the problem or what the underlying.
When my doctor looked at my files and saw that there had been no progress for 10 years, he decided to do another test just to see what was going on, and I scored 98% on that test.
So it must be comfortable though, knowing now. Now I know what it
Yes.
is. Okay, now I can do something about it. What about you, Rosie? Where did your journey start?
Well, it started when I was about 12. I had a minor head injury at home. I fell down the stairs, like any kid.
Mm-hmm.
And they did like a brain scan at the back of my brain. And I don't know what told them, but they told my mom that I likely had ADHD. She chose not to tell me, so I didn't know. I found out when I was 17 and I had 7 jobs. And my doctor kind of hinted at that. And that began a long journey of getting an official diagnosis. Even though I got my first diagnosis at that age, 17, a lot of times I was questioned if I had it or if I maybe had other things instead. And so I ended up getting 8 diagnoses. I'm 8 times approved for ADHD all the way. And actually in that process, I was also later diagnosed with a brain injury from birth. That was just found out 2 years ago, which has actually been the reason that I was not responsive to typical treatment. So I can't take medication due to the side effects caused by the already present injury that I sustained.
I think that's very common.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
I think that's very common. I've known a lot of people who have severe reactions to a lot of different medications.
Yeah, so I had that journey of essentially learning how to holistically treat it, like in terms of like different therapies and essentially different educational knowledge base, and for me spiritual base in my indigenous roots to finding a healing path that I could handle my condition.
And so how did you two end up meeting?
I started tutoring and coaching for full time during the COVID pandemic. I started volunteering because everybody was out of school or was stuck at home, and it skyrocketed in symptoms. So I reached out and started helping people, and she reached out to me.
I saw her ad, and I saw her heart. And I reached out to her because I had I was on the same path in a whole different world. I saw COVID and I was like, I want to help. I'm an entrepreneur, and I started tutoring too. I started tutoring French because I had a history of tutoring in my high school years. And I was like, they need me. I can help. But then I didn't know how to reach the people. So I started making ads, and because of algorithms.
Right.
They
Too
popped,
young.
her ad popped up because it was related, and I reached out. I was like, "Hey, you don't have a French tutor," and that's how it first came on, and then it blossomed.
It blossomed from
Yeah,
there.
it blossomed.
So
We had
this
a
would be
similar-
like 2020 then that you started this.
That's when I started switching
Yeah.
to full time. I had been working ADHD focused since about 2018, but also doing massage therapy. That was my full time job at the time,
Right.
and I could not do that anymore. But with me and Rosie fitting together was
Blessing.
other things that aren't medication that can help people understand their brain and
Right.
know how to work with it instead
Yeah.
of trying to prevent it or not understanding their own self.
So did you do like extra courses or like different types of education to help, because this is a very broad spectrum.
Yes.
So did you do some other extra things that sort of help you get different perspectives?
We took all the classes that are available for it, which is actually very limited. So we started designing our own because there's very
Doesn't
little
really
even
exist.
for tutoring, for teaching. Like teachers, I think, spend 2 days on it generally in college or university. And life coaching is too broad, so we started narrowing down to where we're seeing the need in people.
Well, that's the entrepreneur, right?
Yes.
You say, oh, there's something that's not available, and you know that there's a great need for
And
it.
then, and with my story, like I had a lot of lived experience tutoring, and then like when I'm at, in my later years here in Calgary working on this, and even we had conversations sometimes where I was nervous that I wasn't qualified.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look back and like really evaluated it, like I came from a neurodivergent home. My brother and sister are younger. I tutored them in francophone education, and then I went on to tutor like other classmates of theirs, so like a few years younger than me. And all of those classmates ended up also having ADHD. I didn't know at the time, but looking back, I know now like they had ADHD, and so I have a kind of like an old client base of people who successfully did improve in their school and work lives with my tutoring. So I feel like I have a skill set and experience. Yeah.
Right. And so parents are getting really involved as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you'll have parents apply to talk to us about things they don't understand that they're seeing in their child. Yes.
Right.
They'll want to meet with us, or they will want to learn more about what they're seeing, or they will discover that they also fit, especially for females. The diagnosis rate is drastically lower than what it should be for females. There was a long time that females were not diagnosed with it.
It was more on the male side, right?
Yes, I believe.
And what
it was
about
till
the
90s.
education system, like with teachers, or do you have any that are willing or come and ask you any questions?
Oh, yes.
Because I imagine if you have a classroom full of like half the classroom's ADHD, you want some help.
I would say in a typical classroom, because we're about 13% of each population, or any given population, about 13%. So in a classroom, we will have some teachers willing to work with us, but then of course we have some teachers that are not, because the classroom sizes are large. And to give the kind of one-on-one direction that an ADHD student needs, they will start referring out to us or another business similar, which is hard to find, luckily.
Oh, right.
So yeah, it sounds terrible. Luckily, we want more, but
so maybe it's about expanding. It's about expanding your particular business with other people that can come in and help out.
Or having parents be able to advocate with the school system is very important. That they understand what's happening, they see what's happening. That failing grades do not mean their child is actually struggling with the subject matter. They're struggling with the setting,
or the system,
or they can't self-direct.
That was the one thing that really.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, having two sons that went through the education system, one thing that I did find is it's very narrow. This is how everybody learns, and it just never made sense to me. Like, you've got two history classes, two different history teachers in high school. Why not have one be visual and one be literal?
Yes.
And then all of a sudden your grade point level comes all the way up, because not everybody is literal. Not everybody reads the books. They're documentary instead. So I mean, I think that would probably apply to the ADHD, because they'd probably be more visual learners. Would they not be more visual learners?
Visual or kinetic? Kinetic is big. So the hands-on, actually experiencing the
really
subject,
being immersed in.
So what do you mean kinetic? Can you explain that to me?
Well, tactile. Like you can feel it, smell it, taste it, hear it. Like if you want to learn about the different teas, someone can tell you there's white, there's black, there's green, and you see white, black, and green in your mind.
Yeah.
But for a kinetic learner, they're not really going to pay attention unless you serve them a cup of tea and say, this one is white tea, this one is green tea. They're going to taste it
Those
and
experience.
remember it.
It's actually really
Yes.
experiencing it. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Right.
very hard for teachers to be able to do that.
Oh, gosh,
so we can't.
But there's examples that if you like would remember from, maybe your earlier years in school, like when you were working with like alphabet blocks.
Yes.
That's a really good example of like something experiential. It's got the pictures, it's tactile, they can remember how it felt in their hand, how it felt. Like, and if you think of like Braille, that's a really good example of tactile learning. Like those people are very attuned to physical learning. They read that way, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
if you look at Braille, it's a really good example of tactile or kinetic learning.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And they learn so fluidly like
Right,
that.
because you're
and
feeling the words.
Yes,
Yeah.
Right,
exactly.
yeah.
Or
Yeah.
some children do learn better, say, watching a documentary, seeing subtitles, and being
Yeah.
able to read them while seeing
And-
it being
yeah.
acted out.
And there's actually like completely nothing wrong with a student learning Braille to learn anything else if they want to. Like
Right.
there's nothing wrong with it. You don't have to be blind to learn Braille. You'd be a very big asset in the community and potentially get jobs later on in life if you did.
Oh,
And
of course.
if that works for the kid, we really work on like developing a relationship with our clients and finding out like what is specific to you, because every ADHD is different. There's such a I like to use the word spectrum, but I mean that can be argued if that's the right term, but I like to say a spectrum
Yeah.
of different ADHDers and mixed other diagnoses.
Symptoms, comorbid
Right.
disorders.
Well, there was a couple of terms that there was 4 that really popped out at me. And one was rejection sensitive dysphoria.
Yes.
So can you explain that one to me?
That one's complicated because it's fairly recent that they've started looking into it, but that would be, say, a student struggling with a subject, they're perceiving or experiencing rejection from a parent, a teacher, their peers. They might actively avoid the subject or avoid situations where rejection will take place. And it will look like straight up avoidance. And that's not what's occurring. It's avoiding rejection like every human does.
Yeah, I was going to say
but
that's
at a
pretty human,
dysphoric
but at a
like
really high level.
catastrophizing level.
Yeah,
Oh.
so tone of voice, the way the eyes move, anything slight that changes in that conversation, they will perceive as rejection. So the ADHD brain is 25% faster than a neurotypical, so they've already sensed or perceived rejection, even if that was not the intent.
Right.
Yeah. And then sometimes like it can be like a deterrent to to trying new things.
I didn't
because of
realize
sensitive to the
25% faster.
Yes.
Really is a Ferrari engine.
Wow, right?
I know.
Sarah and Rosie, Sean here. For people not seeing me in the camera, I'm just producing this episode here, but I'm fascinated by the subject matter. I just got a quick question for you too. So when you both got diagnosed with your ADHD, essentially, like talk me through when you discovered you couldn't like focus your attention on something. So when someone's talking to you and then your mind starts to drift, like what goes on in your mind when, like, for instance, someone says they're not paying attention, I'm trying to show them math. But what does your mind default to? Like, what are you thinking about? Because I'm starting to wonder, did I have undiagnosed ADHD? Because when I was growing up, when certain things when people were talking, I found them boring, quite frankly. Then I ended up, my mind starts to drift. But then because it's drifting, I didn't catch the last 20 sentences they said. So then I lost track of what they're talking about. They came off like I didn't understand what they were saying. But the reality was I just stopped paying attention.
Yes.
Right? Because of, and things you just mentioned about the kinetic movement thing. I never thought about that. If someone is talking slow like this and doesn't move his hands, like I'm going to fall asleep. Right. But for you guys, did you guys have did your minds default to a certain thought pattern? Like was it anger? Was it frustration? Was it
Low tolerance for boredom. Very low tolerance. Will avoid boredom, will actively avoid boredom to the point of frustrating others. If I found, I struggled with math in particular myself because I had dyscalculia, which is a symptom of ADHD in retrospect. So it's like dyslexia, but with numbers. So it's boring, but I also had a very low tolerance for frustration. So the boredom and the frustration. ADHD is known for recurring daydreams we can return to. So daydreaming the same daydream, but building it up more each time we escape to that thought pattern. And all of ours will be different, but it will be, now I'm imagining I'm doing this other thing and I'm adding details to it when somebody's talking, because that's more interesting than what they were talking about.
Right, because you drift off. If
like
someone's
that
boring you sort of drift
Inception.
off, and you would
Yeah.
go into another thought.
Inception.
It's like Inception.
It's like Inception. You're like
Yes.
building this world in your brain.
And you're changing it.
And you change it, and sometimes you change the color or the flavor of what you're thinking about, and you just kind of approach it from different angles. Yeah.
But it will look like
Yeah.
anxiety a lot of the time.
Yeah,
So-
but I'm perfectly happy in there. Like, trust me,
It's
I'm
great.
doing good, but I might be fidgeting on the outside, and I might look uncomfortable. But I'm actually doing really good when I'm in my dream world.
So would it be safe to say essentially your mind's just default to thinking about stuff you want to think about?
Oh, yes.
For
Right.
me, I don't know
Yeah,
if I
true.
want to. I'll be
Not
honest.
intentionally, but things
There's
that are
no
more interesting.
stop. Like, it just continuously happens. And then, like, through my own journey of, like, learning how to, like, excel in my education, like, I did graduate with 2 different diplomas in 2 school systems simultaneously, a year earlier than everybody. But, like, that was because I really, like, internalized, like, a self-responsibility. Like, I choose to say, like, maybe I did have a bit of rejection sensitivity, but in a way, like, I'm fueled by a nightmare. And it was like the haters gonna hate, and then that fueled me to, like, essentially be the master of thyself, you know. And I really, like,
Would you agree that would be a return to, like, a passionate subject mentally when it was somebody was making you kind of zone out? It was,
like when
I'm going to think about another subject that I like more.
Yeah, exactly. I would drift
Yeah,
off
I think
into
that's
those
where the dopamine's at.
Right.
those other side thoughts, and they're great though, like, because I've always compounded on them. They've led to great success, and so I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's like
No,
a really
I
helpful
think-
tool, and I think I wish more people could do that.
Right.
It's a gift
Yeah.
and a curse.
Yeah, it's a gift and a curse. Yeah.
Does the studies of ADHD essentially, like, this is a theory I have, and tell me in your studies of it what you guys found, but do you think it's because humans prior to recent technological, like, luxuries, like, we were so busy before that our minds couldn't drift, but now we're almost not busy enough? Because think about it, back then, when the instant the sun goes up, you're busy. You have to physically go do stuff just to eat and have your basic necessities, and that's from dusk till dawn. Like, I almost feel like ADHD could be a natural phenomenon of the first world, because we're just not busy enough with tasks that fully engage our entire
us, right.
being from start to finish, you know. I don't know.
ADHD first started showing up in medical textbooks, which shocks everybody, in the 1700s. So 1765 was when they started really looking for and at it. And actually the catalyst historically was Leonardo da Vinci. So he was all over the place. He was a painter, a
sculptor,
scientist,
an architect.
Founded medication. He designed a helicopter that
The
would have
jack of all
flown,
trades.
but he never got around to actually building it. And kind of the whole world looked at that and went, what was that? That was very interesting. And it took another 200 years before they really started isolating the impulsivity, the inattention, what that leads to. And it started with looking at people who were so impulsive, and then looking at people who are just struggling at home or in school or unable to live as a society.
So it's almost like there's 2 different sides to it. There's those that take it and run with it, and it becomes a positive thing, and those where it's more stifling and holds them back and slows them down.
Yeah, and I think I want to add on to that, because it's really important to me to share this. Like, in my culture's history, so if we're talking the first peoples of this world, which I am from, my lineage goes back to the Cardinal line with St. Laurent during the invasion of the French and all that. So, but that being said, in the Indigenous communities, we never talked of it. Like, ADHD wasn't like looked to be found. It wasn't looked to be found. We didn't look to name it or diagnose it. It was a skill set that was already accounted for in our system of governance. We had essentially roles for people who exhibited those behavior types. We would have maybe, if you were to word it in our languages, maybe have referred it to behavior types, if anything, because there were certainly people who were night owls. who definitely did like our patrolling, or maybe like we had surveyors who would go out, messengers that would travel between tribes, people that essentially needed to have a variety of skills, like of endurance, and they had roles and they were perfectly accepted. It wasn't something that was to be changed or treated. We didn't try to make them
No, there was a
well, certain
roles
things.
for it.
without
Yeah.
using the word inclusivity, but if you can look at, oh, this is what this person's
They
talent
grew
is,
into their own role.
right? And
Yeah.
so this is this person's talent.
Yeah.
Well, then it becomes a
It's a skill.
part of the
Yeah.
community and utilized within the
Yeah,
community.
we
So
did
everybody
have
had their
people
own.
that were responsible for daydreaming. I mean, if we looked at sort of like some of the medicine women, or some of the as in some cultures they call them shamans or healers.
Right.
These people spent long periods of time just sitting around thinking.
And doing their passion. They were able to pursue that.
Yeah,
Right.
and
Was it
it was
modern
very
society,
naturally
not so much?
accepted. But like, even so, the terminology is hugely helpful in this day and age for our Indigenous peoples in terms
Right.
of like, again, fostering an environment where they can grow. You know?
Right.
They do. We do need that terminology nowadays because we live in a whole different world.
He wants to come back in.
So you had ADHD paralysis.
Yes.
Can you explain that one?
Oh,
I was sipping water.
Is that sort of? I mean, when I read it, I would think it would play into the other one with the rejections. Almost like I can't go there. Like it's just it's too scary.
So-
too what?
ADHD paralysis would be if somebody's sitting on their phone and what we nickname doom scrolling. So just scrolling on our phone that
I
doesn't
think everyone
mean
experiences a little bit of doom scrolling now and
Yeah,
again, but it's
but
beyond that.
it would be we're doing that and it looks, the word that's often used is it looks lazy. We know that we have to do XYZ at home. We have a full day off.
Yeah.
We know we have to do the dishes. We know we have to clean up. We know we have to go to these events or whatever it may be. But we can't get
And we're
our
thinking
brain
about all that stuff too.
into it. We are ruminating in
It
our
kind of
heads.
goes back to
that-
what
Yeah, I was just
Sean
going to
was
say.
saying.
Go
Yes.
back to what Sean
Because
said
Sean
in
was
regards
saying,
to.
like, we kind of check out and we have this thought pattern in our head and we go to that, and we're kind of stuck in that in an
Can't move
ADHD
it.
paralysis. Like, I'll be saying to myself over and over, like, I need to take out the laundry. I'm going to get up right now, and I'll even try to like tell myself, move your left foot, like, and it has to at some point. I almost need intervention, and for me, I have certain like alarms that'll go off throughout the day to check in on me, for me to check in on me and see if I'm awake and actually the lights are on and somebody's home. Because I do fall into these traps, and it's a big issue for me. That's one I still struggle with. I can have 3-4 hour ADHD paralysis, especially if there's nothing planned. I'm like, oh well.
And some will
Nothing's
be
planned.
frozen by almost
Frozen.
an anxiety
Yeah.
level where it's I have to sit here because it's the only place that I feel safe being.
Yeah.
Yeah, like to further on that, I again I have this theory that is based off of this. Do you guys watch MMA at all or fighting?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, so there's this famous fighter. His name is Nick Diaz. So Nick Diaz, he's a big time. In the fighting game, his main skill set is a long term endurance style. Like he's the guy who throw 1,000 punches in a fight instead of 20, right? But he had a horrible childhood. He was diagnosed ADHD. He was like picked on by kids. They put him all these medications and people put gum in his hair, and because he was all zonked out from all the meds.
It's different.
But Nick's journey got fixed when he discovered martial arts, because he started realizing it's like his body, it has kind of like an animal where you need to go for your walk and everything like that. It's like he has so
Yes.
much built up natural, like it could be just like adrenaline, testosterone, this, that. And then if it doesn't have a place to go,
An outlet.
it turns into what appears like
Internal,
ADHD.
yes.
So to go back to when you're talking about the indigenous people, like so some of the warriors, right? If their entire patterns for generations and generations was nighttime fighting or patrolling, think about it. Like their glands are adrenalized.
We're lean muscled.
Yeah. So then it's like, so there's like decades and decades of that. And then all of a sudden, like the pace of life slows down. The body is always ramped up, but the mind has nowhere to harness it.
Yeah.
So then I always feel like when you're saying you have this 4-hour stall of a paralysis, is because back in the day, if you're in a village again, like just fulfilling your roles is a 24/7 job. There actually is no break. The break is just to sleep. Otherwise you're back at it. So it's almost like our minds have not adjusted to, our bodies have continued this momentum of
We were also
what it was.
foragers too. We would eat throughout the day, and that's a big thing too. But yeah, I can speak to that story. Your theories might be going somewhere.
Yeah, I
honestly,
like that.
because I ended up taking on boxing in my life, in my youth, when I really had a lot of anger. For me, like, I found that my high energy came out in anger because I felt stifled.
Rachel actually fought too.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I was
a
Muay
fist
Thai
thrower, but
for 5 years.
I learned that, people who voluntarily want to be punched in the face will volunteer, and you can join a boxing club.
Right.
So I did, and it was great because I was much happier about that. But I found that it taught me a huge level of like physical discipline, and in terms of like I would be like what you would call hyperactive, essentially. Like, that would be my classification in ADHD. I fall in that spectrum, and I do have a lot of energy. I have to get it out. For me, that wasn't boxing and like physical. I work out like daily. I choose to. I like to walk a lot, and for me, that's a form of therapy and healing. It allows me to get things done. Like, I can have a great productive conversation if I get my workout in.
Well, I mean, exercise affects all the systems, including the brain. So as we were talking about, like with dopamine and serotonin, so that's one of the things that worries me is about doctors going directly to medication, and not, because that's not always the best. And because a lot of times what you can do is become so dependent, and so now the brain is creating serotonin, say, or dopamine based on the medicine. You take the medicine away, the brain no longer repairs itself to creating that dopamine and serotonin.
A lot of people feel that way, Rachel.
Yeah.
A lot.
Or they'll take the medication and it's not actually improving anything.
Right.
Because
well, they're
it's not
sold this idea
energy,
it
but
will.
I still feel helpless, or I still feel depressed, or I still feel anxious and alone, or I still have rejection sensitivity that I don't know the word for, and I feel like I'm the only one in the world that's
I think
sensitive.
there's a time and a place, and also there's a personal experience you need to go through to figure out if medication is right for you. But always look at it as a tool. I mean, if you take Tylenol for a sore-ish problem, you're still going to go to the physio. You're probably still going to go to the doctor. You're still going to do the healing steps, even though you're taking Tylenol while you're healing.
And you do want to get off the Tylenol.
Yeah,
because
you don't
it's not going to do well on your liver.
We all know
or
Tylenol is just a temporary solution. But like, even if you were sick and you take a cough medicine, you're also going to do other things to improve your immunity at that time, or maybe rest, all those other things.
You want it to be an aid and helpful.
Yeah,
but not necessarily. This is it. This is how you have to do it. It's the only answer.
And I'll jump in there that I have seen a shift towards the medication is there to help you slow down and learn strategies.
Right.
But it is not a Band-Aid or a one-size-fits-all anymore. And some doctors will hold off on it because historically it was
like, oh, here, take this, you'll be fine.
And then
it's like,
and
no.
people were not fine.
Yeah, they're not fine.
In my story, I had lesions after taking them. So, like, on my brain, which produced more issues that I already didn't need.
Right.
Everybody's brain would be different.
Yeah, everybody's. That's just my story, because I was born with that super rare brain injury. Like, how could anyone know?
Can you educate me on what are the meds again, and what are the exact things they're supposed to do? Or is there such a variety that...
There's a lot of brands that I probably can't mention by name,
right.
but a lot of brands, they've expanded quite a bit, but they are stimulants. So our brains are faster, but our neurotransmitters don't meet correctly.
They are in testing and slowly releasing non-stimulant options. I was recently on a trial for one. It wasn't successful for me. And I won't go into that because it's pretty new, but yeah, they're looking. I think they're approaching this openly to new research, and I'm glad for that, because we could use some more options, because primarily they have been for a really long time stimulant-based options.
Well, that's what I was saying. Like, stimulant sort of seems weird if someone is hyper,
right?
And I'm going, well, then why would you give them a stimulant? Like, but then again, you don't want to give them, a depressant or
We are hyperactive because if we imagine a neurotransmitter attachment and a neurotransmitter like dopamine or serotonin trying to meet it, it will bounce off.
Right.
So it will lead to an unfinished task, unfinished thought. What this medication is designed to do is boost the neurotransmitter surface so that the
Stimulate
neurotransmitter can actually attach
Right.
Yeah.
and make a synapse or make a muscle
Like
connection.
the glue that holds the things together.
Make it go there.
So I'm going to ask a completely different way, but how familiar are you with the endocannabinoid system? Because that is all about connections.
Yes.
Right.
So ADHD will have a long list of comorbid disorders
Right.
with the endocrine system. So hormonal imbalances, autoimmune.
No, endocannabinoid is a completely different system. It's the one that works with hemp and with cannabis.
Yeah, it's your
And
receptor
it's-
Oh,
system.
yes.
It's
for-
a-
Like
it's a
now I
good-
recognize
right.
that.
It's a
Yeah.
so
I'm really
its
familiar
job
with
is to create
That's
balance
more-
within all the systems,
Yeah.
whether it be the
that. I studied
respiratory
that in high
system.
school. Actually,
Yeah.
I wrote my paper on it.
Right.
Sorry, so we're talking about like smoking weed?
Well,
Like,
Or
like-
Well, we could talk
necessarily.
about
Because
smoking
actually-
weed, but
No.
not necessarily.
No.
Like you can, again, when you're just smoking, you're not getting the same effects because it's going in through the lung and through the blood
Yeah.
system. Where if you're doing it sublingually, which would be in an oil,
Yeah.
the MCT is
Or you
always
can
the
do it
best.
Topically sometimes.
Or
Yeah, for the
topically
skin.
can work really well, but that when you do it topically, you're really only hitting that one
Yeah.
area. So for pain and inflammation, it's great.
Yeah,
But
we
you're
have
not
a lot
gonna
of
break the blood-brain barrier.
comorbid clients because a lot,
Yeah.
like you or I, we're all very diverse and very complex beings. Like we're
Right.
not just, we can't just label someone only ADHD, and that's really unfair to even say anyone is just anything.
Yeah.
We're very complex and diverse. So
with the,
yeah,
I think what she's
But
asking
yeah.
too is
back to the
how
the
we're in an
systems.
Yeah.
ADHD room, but
Right.
Yeah.
with are
That's
you
right.
asking if the use of is
Yeah,
beneficial
like-
or
Well, I know that it is because that's something that I've
Research
studied.
has held
I've
up quite
studied it
well.
Yeah.
for probably 12 or 13 years, so I've got a lot of study in on it. But it doesn't work for everybody. Like everything doesn't work for everybody. But I've known quite a few people that do use it, but you have to
Yeah.
know, you have to be talking to the right person
I mean,
to get the right.
At the end of the
to get
day,
the right-
because it's such well, first of all, it's just recently become legalized to even choose that option. Because it's such a new area, and because we are not experts or certified in
Yeah,
anything cannabis related,
Yeah.
so we don't promote it with our clients. I've only had maybe one or two conversations with some of my adult clients
Yeah.
where that has come up, and from a personal standpoint, I've done a lot of research on it. I can share with those clients, maybe some sources of information where they can ask those questions, but I won't usually directly coach them in that. There are a lot of like medical facilities that
there is,
have
yes.
physicians and counselors and people who are educated through the college systems
Right.
and degrees in that are way better resources than we are in terms of like really helping you manage that. Because what I know, because I did write a paper on it for grade 12,
Right.
but that was years ago, but what I know from people in that community have shared with me is there's so much more research coming out.
Oh,
And
it's
it's
fast
so-
and furious.
Yeah, we encourage people to do research, and we will
Right.
definitely send them to the right sources.
right.
Yeah,
Because
so
there's
I don't know
definitely-
enough. Like we're not experts.
No, it's definitely
ADHD
expanded a lot
Yeah.
in the last 10 to 12 years
Yeah.
for sure, and even in the
but
last
we'll
5
help
years.
you along that journey.
Right.
Like we'll definitely be there to like again add skill set to the tools you're using.
Right.
Right.
It is
That's
about
our
the right
job.
strain
Yeah,
for the
so
right person, because there's, like any plant, there's like terpenes in it, right? So say usually when you're talking cannabis, you're talking a sativa or an indica, and like one of the main terpenes in indica is lavender, which is relaxation.
Yeah,
So there's a
linalool.
lot of other plant sort of terpenes that are inside
Yeah.
each plant, but now they're
Paraffin
hybriding things
and-
together, and in some cases I find it to be more of a money making thing than it is actually to be helping people.
Yeah,
like
if I have a
they've
client inquire, I refer them to a cannabis doctor.
Yeah, they
Right,
have
yeah.
cannabis
There's a couple of
clinics,
clinics
and
here in
they're
Calgary that are
awesome at figuring out
that are
Yeah,
really
'cause
good.
there's-
Yeah.
It's really, again, like if you're going to use it as a tool in your tool chest, it's about figuring out how useful that is, how frequent. Like there's so many things that are involved, and it's a personal journey. We would never like discourage someone,
No.
of course, unless they were underage. But we would never discourage someone from exploring that. But we wouldn't be the person we would say like are the expert. We don't want to
No,
Yeah.
exactly.
encourage them to
You're-
come
yeah.
to us with their questions, but we would definitely work alongside them with like skill sets and tools like day to day that would
Help a
aid
little.
them with
So
that.
you're always expanding.
Yeah.
You're always expanding your outreach and bringing in other
We learn
specialists and
stuff
other
from clients
other
all the
ways. Right?
time.
Yeah.
They bring us really great ideas all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go back to this, the ADHD paralysis. Is that time blindness? Do they sort of kind of go together? Are they very similar, or are they completely different?
So time blindness is more a neurotypical, or I think all those words are very sensitive, but the vast majority of people are able to sense time. So if you put an ADHDer in a darkened room with no windows, can't see the sun, 10 minutes can feel like an hour, and they might guess times, or they might not know how long a task will take, or avoid a task that's only 10 minutes because it feels like 60, even though it'd be easier to do it.
It goes both ways too. Like if you're really anticipated, excited, and passionate about something, you might underestimate your time. Like if you're a great chef, like I'm an ex-chef. I did cook, and sometimes I do that to myself. Like I'm like, oh, I'm great at this. I can cook this in 20 minutes, and I'm like, oh my god, it was totally a 40-minute job,
Right.
you know. And I
6
didn't have this,
hours
and
later.
I'm like, yeah. Or sometimes I get to like a little bit like takeout that night, but yeah, like.
But with paralysis, I would say
time blindness and paralysis are not the same.
Not the same.
Not
It's
quite,
just an inability to judge how much time
it would take you to do
has
a task.
passed or to pass.
Right.
You know, for a task. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Right.
if we get really, really into, say, a video game or something that gives us the
Right.
dopamine, all of a sudden 3 hours felt like only 30 minutes. So if we were asked to do something and somebody was like, can you do this before I come home? And we're like, oh, we still have lots of time. And they walk in. Like,
Goes back to why I have
What?
alarms throughout the day.
This would explain
I
my
don't know
husband.
what time it is.
This would totally explain my husband. It says, yeah, I can have that done in 15 minutes. I'm like, no, you can't. Like, no, because it's
really
going to
good.
take 20 minutes to get there, and then you still have to do it. Like it just seems
Yes.
like he overputs things into a time period that is not possible to do it in.
It's almost like color
Superman.
blindness. You know,
Yes.
you don't
Yeah.
know
Don't
that
see
it's
it.
not pink.
Right.
You think it is something else. You just believe
Brown.
that. And you know,
What
you
time
just
is
believe
it?
it. It's just the reality of it. Like I don't give people really great times on things. I'm just like I'll be there ish every time.
But comparing it to paralysis would be, paralysis is we know what
Yeah.
time
Oh,
it
it is,
is.
and we
I
just
Can't move.
meet the expectation
Right.
of
Yeah.
time, so the time has been
Yeah.
sucked into my internal
And
vortex.
it's a chemical imbalance situation. The time blindness, there's not necessarily like an extreme chemical imbalance, but in paralysis, there has been studies showing that essentially you are completely out of dopamine. Like you can't even self-initiate. Like you can't start your car. Your starter is broke. So
Muscles
there's
will
no
hurt.
spark. So you almost do need an external spark, whether that's a video. I follow a lot of ADHD content, and I find that we like to help each other. So I will stumble upon a video where someone will absolutely say, hey, listen to me, you need to wiggle your toe right now, and you need to break out of that. You have laundry to do, and I love those guys. Thank goodness for that.
I know.
I need
Is
to
there
make myself one of those videos.
Is there a lot of content out there?
Yeah.
There is, and that's what we
Good and
aim
bad?
to do, but
Do you
it's-
find that or is there just
I don't
no?
really have an opinion on it. I mean, it's content.
it's
Right.
content, but yes, it's like some is good, some is bad, some is really good, some
Right.
is really, really,
Yeah.
really bad.
Yeah.
But with clients, it's helping them find what fits their symptom
Right.
picture, because when you go online and Google ADHD symptoms or ADHD help or anything like that, you will get a million hits. But they
It'd be
won't all apply.
overwhelming.
And then again, yes, we will get immediately overwhelmed and then never open
Don't even
it
know where to
again,
start.
or we
Yeah.
won't
Yeah.
move forward because we're reading every
Yeah.
single one.
So
And
when-
we like to be there for those people, for those conversations. That's kind of where we end
Yeah.
up, is that like someone will say, hey, I've seen this video. What do you think this will work for me? And then we'll talk about it. We'll like brainstorm with them, because otherwise you get very overwhelmed with even whether you have rejection sensitivity or maybe just a super creative mind. You get stuck in the get ready, aim, and never fire situation.
Right.
So for some of us, we get stuck in the thinking part, and we have to think it all out. So either way, like we like to be there so we can like have a conversation and huddle with you around that particular hurdle, or maybe particular advice that you heard, or whatever it is, like just to see if it fits.
Right.
And test
So
it out. Test out the waters.
If somebody's calling you, or messaging you and saying, I think I have ADHD, where do you start with that? Let's just say if it's let's just go with an adult right now. If it's an adult.
Adults are harder to diagnose, but we refer immediately, of course, to a doctor.
Right.
Because getting the diagnosis, luckily, isn't as hard in Canada. In the States, it is very hard. We do have clients in the States that
You
it's
could get it 8
financially-
times here.
it's financially inaccessible for them to get the $3,000 test and then have it renewed every 3 years to sustain a long-term diagnosis. But we refer to them first. They will fill out a SNAP form, which is a list of symptoms that's given to someone you live with, someone who's known you for years. And I think there's 3 sets. So if there's a spouse, they fill it out. If there's a parent, they fill it out. And then you fill it out for yourself. They will combine all 3 and look at what matches the diagnosis and what doesn't. And then we will take that and go over what their starting point ideally would be, what they're struggling
they're usually
with.
reaching out to us because they have a struggle.
There's
Like they
usually something,
that's
yes.
usually the first thing they say, and then we have to direct back to like, do you have an active diagnosis? Like we want to be sure that we're well
treating the ADHD.
yeah, because what if we don't ever want to be those people who years later down the road they come back and say, well, I never had that. You wasted my time. That,
Right.
We wouldn't
Yes,
want that,
no.
and that's
No.
why it's important we build that relationship right off the front end. We're asking questions
Right.
and really trying to get to know if we're the right fit. We can't say we are the right fit for everybody, and sometimes there has been changes in seasons for our clients, and we will take over different accounts too. Sometimes because we have different skill sets, and other tutors have been on board before in the past, and
After diagnosis, where would
Yeah.
you go after that?
after the diagnosis, well, then we find the first issue, the
Yes.
one that they probably shouted at us first, right?
Right.
That's why how I got on the train.
Start with
Yeah.
We
problem.
start with the first issue, and like we want to work on with ADHD. What's interesting?
And
Yeah.
yes,
Because we don't want to try to fill them with information they're not interested
Yeah.
in. So let's start with your interests first.
Right.
That's where we start.
And what
then we
about
just
with
develop
children and
naturally.
teens? Is it usually the parents that are reaching out to you, or is it the
I've-
teenager
in
themselves?
my experience so far, I've only had 2 contact me to refer to their parent. We need a parent to be able
Yes.
to sign on
Yeah.
with us. So if the parent's not okay with it, that's okay.
Yeah.
So the parents will typically reach out to us, describe what's happening.
Yeah.
For tutoring, it will be they're struggling with this particular subject and nothing we've tried has worked, or we've tried Sylvan and it wasn't the right fit. We didn't get anywhere.
Or this
That's not
program
even,
or
I was
that
like, not a
program.
knock against Sylvan.
No, there's
Just
Kumon. There's all the
we
different
tried
options.
we tried something, it didn't work, or we're not seeing progression and
results.
it's making the child feel like a failure at the subject instead of taking interest.
Yeah.
So with children, what we do is we take their interests and apply it to the subject.
Yeah.
So if they like math, great. But if they don't like math, we will use the video games, the points in the video games,
Some of them like
geocaching.
stories. Yeah, we've gone all over the place. I had one kid loved storytelling. She was such a drama theater lady. She couldn't do anything in French. And then one day we were like, let's write a play. And she wrote like 20 pages, like a whole script, multiple characters. We had a whole story, and she was just involved in it, you know? So like we take their interest and make that
Apply it.
part of it.
Do you find that there's a certain subject that's more prevalent than others that the struggle is with?
Math.
Math.
So you mentioned math a lot, so
Math
I'm assuming
is
that's
still a
one that
struggle.
might be.
because it fits a box.
I relate to those.
And this is the box, and this is
Mhm.
how we do it, and this is the answer.
Yeah.
It's hard to get ourselves to fit in that box unless
Yeah.
we see.
Right, it's not
experience, feel
opinionated.
it.
There's no opinion in math.
Yeah.
2
But
plus 2
writing
is 4.
Writing is
Right?
a big one too.
Hey, Rosie, yeah, I just caught my major attention when you said that with the one who she couldn't do it until the one
French,
who,
until
the French
she could
yeah,
do it in
until
a play.
until she made it into a play. It's because she found like her purpose right
Yeah,
there. She realized she's a writer
Or like
so it's a
storyteller.
storyteller. Yeah,
And then when that happened, I ended up incorporating the storytelling into math. We started talking about how different cultures learned math. Like we made it a story. Like Japanese people learn this way. And next week we're going to do China. And next week we're going to do... And we made it a story. Like we essentially learning the history of math while learning math, while doing our homework. You know, because it needs to be complex and engaging for the student. And every student's different. Like I had another student really liked being able to write on her shower walls.
Yeah.
Because like you grab a white erase and just use the squares to do your multiplication tables.
Well, that sounds
Why
like
not?
fun, right?
You
That
can
sounds
do
like a lot of fun.
multiplication, division,
Damn,
you do
I wish I had
addition. You've
known
got
about that one.
you've got the grid, and
Right.
white erase just washes off.
So you guys have to be, I don't say have to be, but you definitely sound and seem to be incredibly creative
So are
in
they.
what you
They
do.
are too.
The clients are also creative because
Yeah.
we're all ADHD, and it ends up being like, well, if the shoe fits, like at the end of the day, we end up just having conversations like this right here
Right.
and finding solutions because we all just get a little vulnerable and start bouncing it around, bouncing those ideas around,
Right. Yeah.
and we try weird things. Yeah,
And fun things happen.
sometimes,
So fun.
Yeah.
sometimes they do. I've never had like a bad scenario. I don't think so. No, I've never had a client not do better than when we met them. Every single 100% have had improvements in their social life, their like grades, if you want to look at that, just everything.
But they feel heard
Mm-hmm.
and
That
seen.
is-
And I
I
think
think so.
that's the most important thing, is being heard and seen.
Yeah, we aim for that.
Right.
Our aim puns are so fun.
Yeah.
It's true. Like we can't promise you perfection. We know that it's part of the bag, like of tricks we get when we get this diagnosis, right? So we're always aiming. We're humble with that. Like we are also learning,
Right.
and like
Is there anything that Sean or I haven't asked you that you think is important we should talk about?
Huh?
Oh, let's put you on the spot.
I know. I was like, man, maybe she could go all over the place.
Right?
myself, but-
I took right now. I just want to point out, like, I did take away a lot of from listening you to like break down the entire genre of ADHD, and just one thing I kind of got to. Maybe I'm just confirming, like, confirmation biasing something I already thought, but it's people have to find their purpose is what I find, because when you find your purpose, whether that's one thing or multiple things merged into one, it guides your life in such a way where you won't waste any time. Because I think a lot of ADHD is they're feeling like their time is being wasted. So then their mind defaults to thinking about what they want to think about, right? Like, because
going 25 times faster than everyone else. You
Well,
are
exactly.
wasting time.
And then, there's so many things to choose from too. It can be overwhelming even to go,
Yes.
what is my person? What is it that I do like? Like, I can know as a
Bouncing
kid,
around is
my
okay.
list was long
Yeah.
of what I liked.
And that's okay to switch
Right.
careers or to
Yeah.
like switch
Which I've done
interests is
4
great.
times.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
but entrepreneur when we're speaking of entrepreneurs, but ADHD is 300% more likely to start their own business and succeed at it.
Too. Yeah, I know.
Because we're
Right.
into it and it's ours and we're passion based creatures, I guess.
Right.
This is where we value our time and energy and our interest is there. So there's a lot of famous entrepreneurs as well that have been diagnosed.
Yeah,
with
I
Oh,
think
yeah.
within finding a purpose, you might also just develop and design a lifestyle. Because like your lifestyle is going to be so colorful compared to a neurotypical lifestyle, and a lot of the times, I would want to speak to like the biggest hurdles is like that self-direction. Essentially, like creating structure that is like not restrictive and not like strict, but it's structural and essentially so that you can like do the best in your creativity, like essentially creating room for those hyper focuses in your life. Like if you know that you're maybe a more introspective ADHD or so crazy in the mind, intelligent, but then you don't find you got a lot of time for that. The school system can be very busy, very demanding, and you might have extracurriculars. You need space and you need like time. But you could, for me, like I know my journey, I wanted to create a vision where I could work from home.
Right.
I planned that. I planned to have, and at 14 years old, I didn't have the ways to articulate, oh, that's my purpose or that's my lit vision or any of those kinds of words. But I just knew I wanted to have time at home for me time, for space time, for when I need to recharge or work on a creative project or whatever it is, and eventually
So
that came to be.
is there an exercise or something you would tell somebody to do to help them sort of kind of find, as what Sean was saying, that thing that interests them or that purpose, or something that you can sit down with yourself over a period of a day or a week or a month that would help you direct into finding what it is that you really do find interesting?
So, sorry to interject on that one, but I feel like that's the double-edged sword of the whole process, because you have to fumble your way through life, make mistakes, find what you like, find what you don't like, find what you're good at, discover new stuff that you're kind of good at, and then that you can get good at by putting work into it. Like, if I had to put a number on it, I would say unless you're really lucky, you know exactly what you're trying to do and you're in that direction, you might fumble around till you're 30.
Yeah.
Like most
Well,
of your life might not start till you're 30.
Fumble around to your 50, but one of the things, the reason I asked that question was because you've got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And so if your mind is in 15 different places, if there's something that you can do to bring it down to 3 and say, well, let me fumble all over these 3 to begin with and see how it goes. Trying to do 15 is not realistic or possible.
So when I'm coaching a client that's struggling with a career choice,
Yeah.
it's
Good
one,
example.
give yourself permission to fail at it.
Right.
It's okay. If you fail at it, if a job doesn't work out the way that you thought it would or how you imagined, be okay with that, starting it, so that it's not daunting.
Well, that's not a failure.
exactly.
There's never a failure because you've learned something about
lesson.
yourself. You've either learned
Never
something about
lost,
yourself or
always a
about that
lesson.
business or about there's so many life lessons in that. So I never like to see that fail. Yeah.
Probably misworded, but be okay with.
But be okay with not
Changing
having the
it.
expectations that you thought it was going to have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Right?
release those
that term failure always confused me because when I actually did bottom out and hit a career that I hated, that I thought would be, I was in oil and gas, which I hated.
Oh,
Anyway,
no.
yeah, and I did the whole thing, got a degree, was making good money, was able to afford the things I got, but internally I knew this wasn't me. I knew I had to do something like this, but just all I was trying to say with that was the failure. I think the failure fear, at least for me, which is what made me stay in that realm for a long time, was your effect on others. Right,
Yeah,
like
well,
It's disappointing others.
Well, it's also things like like my folks were pointed out. They weren't trying to be malicious on it. They just were like, "Hey, you realize we paid for your schooling, and then that guilt is in your brain forever. You're like, well, I better at least ride out 10 years in this career, But by the 6th year, I was mentally so checked out from it for me. But I think that failure thing, it's failure. Like I don't actually take failures ever because I know I'm just learning. But it's when it affects other people. That's when I'm like, man, like it's a different feeling and that's the one I struggle with. Otherwise, I would have bailed on that whole thing all earlier and made myself happier earlier. So that's just my personal whatever.
Yeah, and that makes sense because
testimonial.
you are affected by the world around you, and as there's so many levels of that world where you have different circles as they get closer into your family, right? So disappointing somebody is definitely. So what about, do you tell your clients maybe use a diary to do a lot of writing?
I'm glad you asked that because I actually require with my clients, and that's just how I operate. I require them to do a daily journal with me. Actually, we share our journals at the start of every class lesson, group meeting. So it depends what's happening. But we call it different things. But when we get together, we always start with a journal. I always share first, and it's not
helps you focus things in.
There's just
and
so
I think
much
to
value
see and
in
know
it
what you're
for
thinking.
an ADHDer. And I don't have a specific journal that I recommend. Everyone has a different type of journal. Some like a flip pad. Some like bullet journals, really complicated. Some like stickers.
Yeah.
Whatever works for you. But essentially, it's a daily log but it helps with time blindness big time. But it also just helps get to know yourself, because it's in those pages with what's going on day to day that we find the hurdles, that we find the fears, that we end up having conversations. And also, like, it gives them 1 minute in their entire day where they make time for themselves.
Right.
Slow down. And I don't even mind if they never share it, or if they write one word, or if they draw a picture. We used to do sometimes like calligrams. We made it fun.
Emojis.
Emojis.
I use emojis a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was just to give them that responsibility and ownership over themselves. Just to give them something private, that they don't have to share. They could choose to share. It really gives them a confidence. It gives them a place to build confidence from, and personal development. So I am a huge advocate for journals. That's what I teach through. But we don't use it the whole thing. It's just it's just the beginning. It's kind of
one
an
of many
icebreaker,
tools.
too.
One
it's
of many tools
for our get-together as well.
Right.
Yes.
Just to catch up. Where are you at? It's better than how are you.
So now, if people wanted to find you, adults, parents, and children, how do they find you?
We do have a Facebook page, which is AIM ADHD Coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And you can always provide an email as well.
I'll put all this on the show notes, by the
Right.
way.
yes.
Yeah. We'll put everything on the show
Yeah,
notes.
Oh yeah, just basically
Yeah.
plug yourselves. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
So it's AIM ADHD on
on
Facebook.
Facebook, we didn't go with a website quite yet because we wanted to keep our prices as low as possible.
Yeah.
Right.
The state of finances
Right.
across Canada is that we wanted it to be financially accessible help for everyone.
That's really important for both of us.
Huge.
She did start with volunteering her services, and so same with like I took on clients, and we even have had sliding scales for pay rates, and so we're very flexible because we do understand financial impulsiveness. I don't know what you want to
Not
call
everybody.
it.
Not
We're
everybody's in the same.
We're not the best with budgets.
Right. Not
So-
everybody's in the same boat.
Yeah, and there's
Right.
different dynamics. Some people are from large families, small families, double incomes, one incomes. Like it's all over the
Right.
place, and we're all we all just very much need some help, and so we all get together there.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you, ladies, for
That's
coming
awesome.
down
Yay.
today and bearing the lovely heat in Calgary, which
I
is
know.
better than the snow.
I love it. I'm a summer baby, so
Yeah.
I am a winter person. I might be the only person that, maybe it's because I'm from Manitoba, where I'm like, I kind of miss the snow sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes.
Okay. Well, we'll end it here, and
Thank you
we'll
very
put
much,
Sean.
we'll
Thank you,
we'll
Rachel.
put everything in the show notes so that you can reach out to both Rosie and to Sarah.
Thank
And I
you.
really appreciate you coming down and
Thanks
for
sitting
having us.
and talking with us today.
Yeah, Sarah, Rosie, definitely thank you for coming down. I learned a lot today, and I'm going to enjoy editing this podcast. I'm going to review what you guys were talking about and continue to get smarter in my own ways and understand myself. Okay, bye everyone.
Thanks, everybody.